So, yeah. Good morning, everybody, and I'm honored to welcome you to the second session of the day. The subject of this session is Fit for 55 and Beyond, Insights in the Revised Renewable Energy Directive. As you know, last July, the European Commission adopted a package of proposals to make the EU climate, energy, land use, transport and taxation policies deliver on those objectives. Among those proposals, there is the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive, which aims at increasing the level of ambition of renewable energy policy in the EU. As you know, renewables are a key tool to combat climate change, but at the same time, they are a key element to foster growth, jobs, security of supply, and to help European citizens to have access to low-cost energy and competitive energy compared to fossil fuels. So with this in mind, the Commission tabled the proposal to deliver on these 55% emission reduction goals using an increased share of renewables, trying to foster the integration of the energy system and develop renewable hydrogen, and trying to enhance the sustainability of bioenergy. The goal of this session is to provide stakeholders with an insight on the legislative proposal, its ambition, its goals, and support, obviously, the ongoing debate around the co-decision process. So it will focus on the uptake of renewable energy in transport, industry, electricity, and buildings. So we encourage you to use the Slido questions to ask your questions to the speaker throughout the session. So we have foreseen a couple of occasions to ask questions to the speakers through Slido. So please visit the website slido.do. You have it on the screen, and enter the code that you see on the screen, and then you'll be able to send the questions to participants or vote the questions asked by other participants. So without further ado, we will move to the first session, where we will have three speakers. And firstly, I would welcome Mestil Worsdorfer, Deputy Director General of DG Energy. As said, Mestil is the Deputy Director General of DG Energy in charge of coordination of the just and green energy transition since October 2021. She previously was Director responsible for sustainability, technology and outlooks at the International Energy Agency, and prior to that she held a couple of director positions within DG Energy, in addition to being part of the cabinet of Commissioner Liikanen. So Mestil, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio, and welcome to everybody. I'm very pleased to open or be part of that session on renewables. I think this is absolutely a crucial part of our European Green Deal, and I would try to explain a little bit the background and the main messages, and I'm sure we are going into much more detail then afterwards in the panel. We all know, and it was confirmed by the IPCC, that we are going into a part which is unequivocal, that human activity is warming the planet. So climate science has moved up. On the positive side, and as outlined by many countries right now, we see more and more net zero pledges around the world, and the EU has come up with the European climate law, being the first continent to become low carbon and carbon neutral by 2050. And we from DG Energy all know that we are part of that debate, as 75% of the greenhouse gases are coming from the production and the use of energy. So in that context, the Commission in July came up with what we still call Fit for 55, meaning how can we, in this decade, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% in 2030. So we have put forward, as part of that Fit for 55 package, 12 or 13 legislative proposals. But what is key for reaching this transition, and there is no doubt about that, is energy efficiency improvements and a faster deployment of renewables. I think in all scenarios, globally and at the European level, we all know we cannot do without the key pillars of energy efficiency and renewables. Antonio already laid out the benefits. So the first aim is to cut greenhouse gas emissions and have a clean energy transition. Secondly, and it's as important as the other, we need to do it cost efficiently. So it needs to be affordable. And that brings me to my third point, which is really the energy prices. We need affordable energy prices for the Europeans. And if that actual crisis we have on energy prices, where we're discussing the spike of the gas prices, which had impacted the electricity prices worldwide, it's a global demand and supply of energy crisis, but it has hit hard most of our European countries and certainly the most vulnerable consumers and the socially less good people, our Europeans, in that context. That's why I would like to emphasize that apart from the low carbon and the cutting of greenhouse gas emissions, we are really looking at the social impacts and how also renewables and energy efficiency can bring down the bill and make it more affordable. And the third key aspect is obviously to be less dependent on energy imports. The EU is still very much dependent on imports on oil, coal and gas. And the crisis now is also here another message to really go down with imports on fossil fuels. We all know that renewables are the cheapest source of energy and in that sense the best response. The EU has been leading the debate but also the progress made on renewables and has become a global leader on that front since we first had introduced renewables targets in 2008-2009. That being said, others are following strongly. We see renewables deployment in Asia, in the US, and in other parts of the world, so we can exchange our good practice, best practice with others. In the context in 2018, and I was happy at the time to be in charge also of the Renewables Directive, we changed the target and it was decided that we have an increased target of at least 32% renewables in the energy mix by 2030. And already at the time, we are emphasizing the use of renewables also in sectors like heating, cooling, and transport. As part of that package in 2018, we also introduced a new governance regulation, and member states have prepared national energy and climate plans, and they showed their determination in delivering the commitments. The good news is, in 2019, we are almost at the 20% renewables of the energy mix, and we have overtook fossil fuels in the EU's power generation in 2020. So 2020, we have achieved basically our EU-wide target. But as I said, we have to speed up, and looking at 2030, we have now proposed to revise the Renewable Energy Directive and setting a new target of 40% of renewables share in the EU's final consumption by 2030. This means doubling from the current share of renewables in 2020 to the energy mix by 2030. This is really an acceleration. But apart from the target, which is important to give a clear signal, the revision of the Renewables Directive also includes a number of measures which are absolutely key to mainstream renewables across all relevant sectors, such as power, buildings, transport, and industry. And we will hear in a second a bit more in detail how we plan to do that. This is complementary to other European policy tools, as we had the offshore wind and renewable strategy, the hydrogen strategy, and instruments on ETS and carbon pricing in order to reach our objectives in a cost-effective way. This means obviously we need billions of investments, both public and private investments, to further deploy all types of renewable technologies, be it the construction of electrolyzers, the grid expansion, which is absolutely key, and adaptation, as well as reskilling and innovation. The good news here as well, we published today the State of the Energy Union, and it includes a first assessment of the recovery and resilience plans of our member states. Nearly all have submitted their plans, and we have assessed so far 22 of those plans. And from an energy point of view, it's very clear that energy efficiency is nearly covered by 28-30%, but also renewables and grid expansion is covered at least by 15% of these plans and the money we give in this huge effort on recovery and resilience. So the State of the Energy Union communication is published at lunchtime today, and you can see that we are going also from the investment side, at least what we see, what member states are committing in their recovery and resilience plan, a clear focus on renewable and energy efficiency. This is obviously helping this massive overhaul of our energy system, and which means the modernization of our economy. And as I said in the beginning, we are going through a huge debate with our member states. What can we do in short and medium and long term to be less dependent, to be more affordable, and prepare better for future energy price crisis? So this is part of that. We need to accelerate renewables and energy efficiency, and I'm sure Europe will reap the benefits in terms of jobs, technological leadership, and a cleaner, just, and cheaper energy transition. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to the debate, and I give the floor back to Antonio. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mechtild, for the very clear and insightful introduction to the goals and challenges of the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. So we will now move to the second speaker, to Lukas Kolinski, Head of Unit for Renewables and Energy System Integration. So in his current capacity, leading the review of the Renewable Energy Directive negotiations. So Lukas is gonna get a bit more into the details and the rationale and the goals of the review of the Renewable Energy Directive. So Lukas, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, I would like to take you a little bit through the elements of the proposal for the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive as proposed in July this year by the Commission, after a very good introduction and sketching of the environment, let's say, for the Renewable Directive, Energy Directive. Let's go through those main elements. Next slide, please. As mentioned already by Mechtild, there has been quite a few changes in the policy framework in the last years, and I think in order to understand the proposal, one needs to take a step back and go to 2018. What happened in 2018? Two things: the Clean Energy for All Europeans package has been agreed, and this included an ambitious recast of the of the Renewable Energy Directive, the directive that is currently in place, but also the Commission in that year proposed in its long-term strategy that Europe by 2050 becomes climate neutral. Since then, this objective, this long-term objective, has been agreed and it's already in place. What also happened is that our ambition for 2030, the climate target for 2030, has also been increased in order to align it with the climate neutrality in 2050. So you have seen the climate target plan, you have seen the Green Deal, which gave the framework for a number of policy proposals that have been put on the table since. I think what is also important to understand the context for the proposal of the Renewable Energy Directive revision are a number of strategies that the Commission has prepared over the last years. Let me mention the strategy for energy system integration, from squeezing out efficiencies from the energy system, breaking up the silos. There was also a hydrogen strategy for those sectors where emissions are hard to abate. There was a renovation wave, because there is no way to achieve this new climate ambition, not only without increasing the ambition on renewables, but also increasing energy efficiency. There was the offshore strategy, and I think we also need to mention the biodiversity strategy, which again increased the ambition in terms of the use of biomass. So you see that the ecosystem of policies has changed since 2018, and this prepared the ground for the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. Next, please. The main elements that can be distinguished in this revision are the following. First, we align the ambition of the directive with climate neutrality, with the new climate target for 2030, which is 55% greenhouse gas emission reduction. And this ambition that is commensurate with the climate effort is 40% share of renewables by 2030. I'll come back to it. Then the other element which links to it is the delivery measures, relates to project implementation. So of course no ambition will be delivered if the projects on the ground don't happen. We still see quite a few obstacles, and therefore on top of a very ambitious framework for project implementation that we proposed, that was agreed in 2018, we add a few elements here, so-called flanking measures related to the power purchase agreements or labeling of the products, permitting or cross-border cooperation. Then we also look at the energy system integration. I mentioned that the Commission has proposed a strategy to this. It's clear that we need to break the silos of the energy system between the pillars of it, between the supply side, power system, and the end-use sectors, transport, buildings, or industry. The best way to go forward is electrification, is direct electrification, and it can take us a long way. But there are sectors where emissions will be hard to abate, where renewables are more difficult to deploy, and this is why we are also preparing the ground for the deployment of innovative renewable fuels. Think renewable hydrogen or even synthetic fuels. We look also at the sectoral ambition because there is no reaching of 40% share of renewables by 2030 without exploiting potentials across all the sectors, also where so far the deployment was relatively slow. And finally, we look at the bioenergy sustainability criteria, because we see that this is the area where we really need to keep an eye on in view of the higher ambition. Next, please. Starting with the target. You see the graph here which illustrates the effort so far and then what the ambition is for 2030. A few elements I think worth noting are that if you look at the past, you have 2010 here, or 2009, we were at around 14% of renewables share in the EU. 2019 or 2020, we are around 20%. That means that we have gone more or less 6 percentage points over more or less 10 years. Now, we need to move from 20% to 40% within the next 10 years. So that's 20 percentage points. That's more than tripling the pace of deployment of renewables if we want to achieve our ambition. What do we have in the current directive? The target is 32%. And when we look at the plans of the member states, they add up to 33%. So there is still a need to move up the gear to go to 40, and therefore we need to really go across all the sectors. What is also important is that while we propose the 40% share for 2030, we keep the current nature of this target, meaning that it's binding at the EU level, but we don't go back to to the nature of the targets for 2020, which was the national binding targets. We keep the current framework for 2030, meaning EU binding and then national contributions, which are guided by the governance regulation. Next, please. I mentioned that electrification can take us a long way, and indeed that's the best route for decarbonizing most of the sectors. Let's have a look at what the directive proposes in this regard. And let's focus, because it's only one element, let's focus on the link between the power sector and electromobility. So what we suggest in the directive, what we propose is to enhance the system integration between the two, to turn this massive deployment of electric vehicles from the potential threat to the power system to an opportunity. For this, for example, we would like to see more information in real time about renewable shares in the power system. That will allow new business models which can develop, which can help to identify the moments when the charging is the smartest, because we want to promote smart charging in the system. Another thing is the access to the battery data, and here we can focus on the car batteries, but we also have provisions for domestic batteries. If the data related to the batteries, its state of health, it's the other data that is stored there is not open to the owners of the batteries, then again the opportunities for smart charging will be limited. We also look at other barriers that exist there, and we want to link up the transport sector and the renewable production in the power sector through the so-called credit mechanism. So renewable power producers will be able to claim credit and trade this renewable power with the fuel suppliers who will be under obligation to have renewables shares increasing. One final point, the Renewable Energy Directive focuses on the links between the power system and electromobility, but the package adopted by the Commission includes also the alternative fuel infrastructure regulation, which focuses more on electromobility, on the deployment of recharging points, on the trips that we should be able to make in electric vehicles. And with this in mind, the two proposals and also the proposal for CO2 for cars are complementary. Next, please. Now, let me shed a little bit of light on the other sectors where emissions are hard to abate, where renewables cannot deploy directly as easily. And I speak here mainly about some applications in industry, high heat applications, for example, and some subsectors in transport, heavy-duty vehicles, or aviation, or maritime. This is where we will need innovative renewable fuels. For example, renewable hydrogen. The renewable hydrogen which is produced with renewable electricity. We also have provisions which prepare the ground for its deployment. It will not come online tomorrow. It's a technology that needs to scale up, that needs to mature, and therefore we treat it differently than direct electrification, but we also keep an eye on this. We propose 2 sub-targets for, as you see on the slide, RFNBOs, that stands for renewable fuels of non-biological origin, read hydrogen, read synthetic fuels. We have a sub-target for the use of these fuels in the transport sector that would be 2.6% of the energy consumption in transport in 2030 per member state. And then we have a sub-target for industry that's not 50% of energy consumption, that's 50% of hydrogen consumed, again, per member state. So we would like to have half of the hydrogen consumed coming from being renewable by 2030. I already mentioned it's hydrogen consumed, not produced, because we would like to see, we would like to stimulate the trade in hydrogen among the member states. And what will also help the scaling up of this hydrogen market is the extension of the certification towards these fuels, and also including them in the database. Next, please. Now, I mentioned that we need to increase the deployment of renewables across all the relevant sectors, across not only transport, but also heating and cooling across industry. And therefore, we have a whole framework of doing it, which includes both measures and targets or benchmarks. And I will not go through all the details here, but what is important is that apart from these sub-targets for hydrogen, we also want to focus more than up to now on the heating sector. The potential there is really high. It's a sector which is fragmented, but we see what there are technologies, there are renewable technologies that can take us further there. So we proposed a mix of targets and measures which will allow the member states, which will allow the heating systems or district heating systems to increase, to exploit this potential. In industry, similarly, we have a number of measures apart from RFNBOs, which will help to increase electrification, which will help to deploy hydrogen. Next, please. I mentioned that the ambition is definitely needed, but we cannot forget about implementation. And I also mentioned that the directive currently in force, which was supposed to be transposed by the member states by mid this year, it includes many ambitious proposals related to the project implementation. We go the extra mile in this revision. We still want to see how these measures which were agreed last time work out, but we also add a few elements. One element that I would like to mention are power purchase agreements. This is a very dynamic market. The market, which currently is focused on large companies, we'd like to expand it. We'd like to help it expand to smaller and medium enterprises. This is an extremely good tool and particularly beneficial in the situation that we're going through now, in the situation of high energy prices. When there is a long-term power purchase agreement, the price is locked. It doesn't move with the market. A very good tool which we'd like to see being used more often. We have a few provisions related to cross-border cooperation. This is how we want to enhance cost efficiency of the deployment of renewables. We have provisions on labeling of industrial products, which industrial products can be labeled as based on renewable energy. A couple of provisions related to permitting or offshore or guarantees of origin, which allow to inform the consumers about the renewable source of energy. Next, please. And then the final pillar, bioenergy sustainability. I already mentioned that it links with the biodiversity strategy. Already in the current directive, back in 2018, we have agreed an ambitious approach to bioenergy based on risk assessment, risk-based approach. We now go for a targeted reinforcement of this approach. And why? Because with this higher ambition, we see that as of 2030, the use of biomass for energy purposes would increase. We want to make sure that this use is sustainable. It's all based on scientific evidence. There has been a report by Joint Research Center of the Commission, and there are three elements that one could mention here. The first one, related directly to sustainability criteria, focuses on the no-go zones. And here, as you see, we look at the new criteria for forest biomass. We ban sourcing from primary and highly biodiverse forests or peatlands or wetlands, and we want to minimize large clear cuts. We expand the no-go zones, in fact. Second, in terms of the scope of the coverage of the directive, we also expanded. Currently, it applies to the existing installations, and it applies to installations bigger than 20 megawatts. We want to, currently it applies to new installations and 20 megawatts. We want to expand it and apply it to existing installations and also small scale, 5 megawatts. Finally, we are looking at the so-called cascading principles. So in short, we'd like to make sure that if wood is used, quality wood is used, it's used where it brings the highest added value, and it's used mainly for non-energy purposes. We will have delegated act on cascading use of biomass, and we also, from 2026, we would like to have no support schemes for installations producing electricity with forest biomass. So we would like to focus on win-win pathways. We'd like to keep the balance between risk-based approach and strong criteria. And this would be all from me. Thank you very much for this. These are but a few elements of the strategy. And now we, of course, look towards the co-legislators, the European Parliament, the Council. We'd like the co-legislators to swiftly agree on the directive so that we can start implementing it. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Lucas, for your very comprehensive presentation. And as you've shown, I think the proposal is much more than targets. It really has a lot of measures to deliver on those targets, which are extremely important. But now, turning to the co-legislator, we have here with us Nicolas Gonzalez Casares. Nicolas Gonzalez Casares is a member of the European Parliament since 2018 for the Socialists and Democrats. He's a member of the ITRE committee and substitute for MB and PECH committee, the Fisheries Committee. And particularly, he's a shadow rapporteur in the European Parliament for the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. So he has a key role for this proposal. So, Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you for inviting me to this event, and also thank you to Lucas and Marcel for great introductions. We are in a particular important year. This is the first European Week of Sustainable Energy, in which we already have the proposals to shape the European Green Deal, this Fit for 55. After the great lockdown, it seems that the world is going to a greenhouse gases emissions record. So we have to change this trend and establish a sustainable green recovery. The Union went to the previous COP in Madrid, COP25, with the objective of climate neutrality by 2050. In the next COP, COP26 in Glasgow, next week ago, we will go with the tools still in the form of proposals to carry it out. So I think the European Union in recent years has carried out intensive efforts to modernize energy climate policies. Several agreements were reached in 2028 and 2029 with the clean energy package, including the Renewable Energy Directive. Paula Antonio knows this very well, carefully. It has been 3 years since the current Renewables Directive was approved, but now we have new challenge and we are in a new scenario. So I believe that the Commission has presented a good proposal. It's very welcome from me, from the Parliament, with measures that strengthen promotion in sectors with more difficulties to the penetrations of renewables as transport, buildings, or industry. But beyond the measures, what is essential during this legislative process is to maintain the integrity of the directive. For us, it would be very important. It should only promote truly sustainable, renewable energy. I think this is one of the main objectives for me as shadow rapporteur. There must be no backdoors or loopholes, and this depends not only on this directive, but also on other complementary and interconnected regulations, as the gas package, TNE regulation, taxonomy, and also the delegated act. It is therefore imperative to maintain the integrity of the directive. Today, energy imports in the European Union represent more than 60%. This should make us reflect the vulnerability we have when comparing it with this happening these days with the COVID-19 crisis, and explains a big part of the current energy prices crisis. Greater integration of renewable energies will also help us to enhance our energy security and reduce our external dependence. I think that you mentioned, Lucas, the green hydrogen. I also want to mention the green hydrogen. I will mention some parts of the revision of the Renewable Directive. I will start with the green hydrogen. As established by the hydrogen and energy system integration strategies, where electrification is not possible, other carriers, such as renewable hydrogen, will play an important role. The Commission's proposal set out ambitious green hydrogen targets for both industry and transport. However, it depends on the development of the delegated acts that define what is green hydrogen, such as the requirements of additionality. Also, I think additionality is very important to truly consider them as incentives for more renewables in an efficient way, because to stop providing renewable electricity directly to produce hydrogen only incurs in a loss of efficiency and increase of cost. You also mentioned the energy system integration. I also worked on this strategy in the European Parliament as shadow rapporteur. I think that our energy system should move from a centralized system where only the production, transport, and distribution are managed towards a decentralized system. I also think that where consumers must have an active role to manage their consumption, store, produce, or sell surplus thanks to digitalization. We also try to keep in mind that digitalization is important for the success of the Renewable Directive, the new Renewable Directive. New provisions on the system integration will help to integrate renewables, to coordinate all sectors, including those more difficult to decarbonize. Also, the demand side should play an important and active role. And above all, I want to mention also the rights of the consumers, the role of the consumers. I think in this sense, the RED II has represented an essential step in giving the consumer and citizens a more active role, thanks to the right to self-consumption and the promotion of renewable energy communities. We must continue to improve the tools to empower consumers and maximize the integration of distributed renewable energy. You mentioned also a crucial point, and I think there's going to be a point of very high discussions in the Parliament about biomass. I think the revision of the directive strengthens the sustainability criteria for biomass, but also the bioenergy targets have been increased. So it could be very difficult to put this in place. So this raises a question mark about the raw materials available to produce advanced and NSB biofuels and the necessary biomass. It is important to be very ambitious, as that the tools and instruments are coherent, robust, and not repeat all mistakes that could undermine the credibility of clean energy sources. And also for me, I came from a region that we have a big deployment of renewables, and I'm observing on my region and other regions in Europe the issue of the public acceptance. I think that deployment of renewables will not be possible with the public acceptance. The installation and operation of clean and sustainable renewable energies must be entirely respectful of the territories in which they are implemented. Not only territories, also in offshore wind, we have to keep in mind, Antonio mentioned that I was a member also in the PETS committee, and I can understand some problems with fisheries, but we have to explain and compatibilize those activities, because it's possible to make sustainable fishing and also make sustainable production of energy in oceans. So I think that we should agree on that, but we have to keep in mind that public acceptance on this point is very important. And also include criteria on local benefits as part of the competitive tendering procedures for support renewable energy products. It could help to increase the acceptance. Also local employees, to promote local employees with the deployment of renewable energy and renewable energy installations could be a good idea, but also keeping in mind the real things that are happening today in society. For example, some factories of some of the producers of the components for producing renewable energy are closing in Europe and sometimes are moving to other regions. So I think that is also an important thing to build a very strong public acceptance, I guess so. And to end, next, I think that we are going to have some questions finally, but to end, I think that decarbonization is not a drag on the economy. It's not a drag on the economy. We have to be very optimistic that we can build a new ecosystem, a new sustainable ecosystem of producing energy. On the contrary, is the engine of competitiveness, economic activity, and also employment. We have several months of discussions until the final agreement. The challenge of the coming months is to increase the ambition of truly renewable energy in a way compatible with ecosystems without undermining the biodiversity, and taking into account the problems that can cause the massive deployment of renewables needed. But don't worry, I will be very ambitious in setting ambitious targets for renewable energy in Europe. So this is my point. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nicolas. Thanks a lot for your supportive remarks, for your ambition, for outlining some of the key issues we will have to face, to deal with, to find solutions in the negotiations. So we look forward to working with you to bring this very important file to a positive outcome. We now move to the Slido session. I think we'll have time for a 10-minute maximum, so maybe one question. I don't know if colleagues can put it on the screen. So I'm gonna, from what I see, I think I'm gonna pick up one of the questions on the role to ensure, how to ensure coherence across the different proposals in the Fit for 55 package. We have 12 legislative proposals touching very different important elements of the overall climate and energy and transport and taxation policy. So how we are going to ensure coherence in the co-decision negotiations to ensure that the level of ambition of the proposals are kept. So I'll maybe start following the order of the speeches. Maybe Mechtild, if she's connected. No. Then we'll start all the way around by Nicolas.
As a co-legislator, I'm co-legislator not only in this Renewable Energy Directive. I'm going to work in the Sustainable Aviation Fuels. That is also other important regulation in this case. So I think that maintain the coherence will be one of the most difficult points, because every group, every member state, but every group in the parliament has his own interests and his own ambitions, and we are sometimes very different. So we are trying to work in close collaboration with all the shadow rapporteurs, but not only. We have to make cross regulations meetings. I think that every group in the parliament is working on that, to create a task force for the Fit for 55 package to maintain this necessary coherence. I think this is a very good starting point to create this kind of task force, but I think it's not enough, because we have different timelines, different agendas, different rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs from different member states, and will be very difficult. So we are not in a fight. I don't want to say fight, but it's going to be a kind of discussion very interesting on how to strengthen collaboration intergroups with stakeholders, also with Commission, and then with the member states. I think this is one of the questions for the next months. I don't have a real and specific answer how to achieve coherence, but I think that the goodwill from the co-legislators, stakeholders, and European Commission will help to achieve it.
Okay, thanks, Nicolas. Now back to you, Lucas, on the same question. Anything to add? Yeah.
Very briefly, the ball is now in the field of the co-legislators, and I'm very glad to hear that this issue, this question of coherence, and as you said, not creating loopholes in between different proposals of the package is high on the agenda. What I can say is that also On the Commission side, as we are there to facilitate the agreement between the co-legislators, we do also continue to coordinate within the Commission very, very heavily and exchange information on how the discussions on different proposals are going, whether this coherence is respected. Of course, I don't need to mention that the most of this coordination effort was done before the July proposals, but even now, as the institution facilitating the agreement, we would like to help in this. So I'm very glad to hear that this is an important thing that you look at. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks, Lucas. So I will now close the session. We need to move to the next panel. So, but first, I wanted to thank warmly the three speakers for their participation today. I think you've helped to paint a clear picture on the challenges and the opportunities that the EUSEW will bring. So, thanks a lot to the three of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good. Yeah.
We still have, look at this. We still have.
Where? There? Yeah, but shall I do it from here or? Okay, good. Yeah, so thanks again for your attention. We'll now move to the second panel discussion with three relevant experts on renewables. So we will have with us Christian Ruby, Secretary General of Electric. We'll have Ricardo Gorini, Head of Renewable Energy Roadmaps at the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. And then finally, we'll have Marina Galindo Fernandez, Senior Manager at Tilia. So we will start the panel discussion with Christian Ruby from Electric. Good morning, Christian. So Electric has been a vocal supporter of cost-effective decarbonization across Europe and electrification. So, what steps do you think are crucial to achieve this goal from your perspective?
Thank you. Indeed, we are very preoccupied with the cost-efficient transition, and I would say that the current backdrop of a temporary increase in prices adds to the urgency of making sure that we do this in a way that is speedy but also cost-effective, so that we really do this at the lowest cost for society and for our citizens. Reflecting on the interventions I've heard this morning and our preliminary reading of the directive, I would stress a few things. Well, first of all, I totally agree with what has been said. It's very clear that we have to double down on electrification as the way forward. That is the easiest way to establish the link between carbon neutral energy sources and the end-use sectors. What we need to remember here is that the current trajectory we have set ourselves on is going to put electricity at 85% carbon free by 2030. We need to be clear about the scope of this ambition. It is a huge ambition. It translates into an additional 500 gigawatts of renewables in 10 years. That's roughly correspondent to half of the existing power system. So we are looking at a very big expansion. And what comes along with that, I'll just mention three things. First of all, we need to be very clear about the fact that renewables are the way forward, but we also need to be clear about the fact that there are supporting sources to make the electricity system function as a system. We need the full set of sources in order to operate the system. And therefore, we need to be careful to strike the right balance between, let's say, accelerating the transition and retaining a secure and reliable system on the way. I'll come back to that. First huge thing is permitting. It's been mentioned previously, and Mr. Casares had the link also to the biodiversity. We see this as a crucial area for further action and probably for let's say refining of the current proposals, because we have to work with this. We have to ensure that the biodiversity targets of the Union are firmly aligned with the climate ambitions and allow for the build out that's needed. I think this can go together. I'm convinced about it, but we need to make sure that the regulatory framework allows for this and that the permitting can happen in a sufficiently speedy manner. We heard about how much we need to accelerate the pace. It's only going to be possible to deliver on the ambition if we have the permission. The second thing I would mention is the importance of grids. As I said, the electricity system is a system. Somewhere between 65 and 70% of the new capacity will be installed locally, so at low voltage level. Currently, this is not getting the attention that it should in the so-called TYNDPs, so the 10-year network development plans. We need to really sharpen our minds and the focus on the importance of distribution grids when we do the overall European planning. Even if it's local, it still matters for the European delivery of the targets. So distribution grids, absolutely critical, and we need to have more focus on it. And the last thing is about investment signals and I would say incentives. Now, when looking at such a massive increase, we need to make sure that we prioritize clarity over complexity. And currently, we do see some concern about the interaction between sub-targets, the bindingness, and how to actually suss out exactly how that's going to work. There is a concern that we have too much complexity and too little clarity in order to get the speed we need to go ahead. Another key point in relation to the incentives is the PPAs and the GOs. So we need to make sure that we have a system for tracking that is sufficiently operable and sufficiently manageable on the basis of how the system looks today, in order to make sure that the investors have the necessary confidence, the necessary clarity for them to make their choices. So we've been looking at the whole, let's say, complex around RFNBOs, and we do think that we need to be very careful and mindful of making a system that is actually workable with the current infrastructure for mapping that we have today. So realistic, let's say, timeframes for the optimization and for the booking of the system, and a system that allows for operators and investors to engage and accelerate. So I'd keep it at that. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Christian. Very clear assessment of the situation, very clear assessment on what's needed to achieve our goals. So do you think that the red proposal strikes the right balance? How would this red revision proposal would contribute to these goals, and do we need something else on top of what we've proposed as Commission?
So I would say we overall, let's say, welcome the direction and what's in the directive. We think that the link to electrification is very important. I would just basically highlight those attention points, which are: make sure that the investment signals are there. so that we get the investors to also engage. Make sure that we prioritize clarity over complexity, and there might be a little bit of fine tuning to do in the whole setting of sub targets and how they interact with each other. This is something we'll be analyzing further and providing recommendations for. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Christian. So I think we'll have the opportunity to come back to some of these points in the Q&A afterwards. Let me move on now to Ricardo Gorini from the International Renewable Energy Agency. Good morning, Ricardo.
Good morning.
So I wanted to ask you a question on bioenergy, which is obviously attracting a lot of interest in the public debate for obvious reasons. So what's your general opinion on the Commission proposal on bioenergy on this front? Yeah.
Thank you very much. So first, I would like to start saying that the energy transition, right, is indeed a multi-dimension effort. So we hear very well the importance of decarbonization as a key component, but also the energy security and affordability aspect. So I think this is a very important, aspects that we need to have in mind. So we are, at the end of the day, speaking here about an energy system that can deliver really resilience, foster innovation, and also, of course, a diversity in a way that we can address all those three special components. So in this case, by 2050, the challenge is really 2050 getting net zero. So the 2030 is a way forward to this global effort. And the 55, it's really very welcome in that sense. It's a very important, not just for Europe, but I would say also for the global, for the world, because it's really setting ambitious targets. And this is, of course, an important message that is there for other regions. So as such, I would like to highlight the importance of this 40% and the role of bioenergy. So as we know, the 32 up to 40% is an important component that will really bring renewables, as mentioned before, up to scale factors that are doubling or more. So that's really important to say. I would like also to highlight the government aspect, because we're not just here discussing the importance of the target itself, but also the other and the coordination and the efforts that are needed across sectors, across, of course, as mentioned before as well, different policies and the discussions and the intelligence that is there on this coordination is very key for the success of the package and also for the implementation. So I think this is also an important aspect that we'd like to highlight. The specific, related to biomass, I would like to bring here how biomass can really bring those objectives as mentioned before. So the specificities, the characteristics that we may consider from biomass are very important to bring decarbonization in different sectors, to keep affordability and energy security. So this diversification of different renewable energy sources is very important in our understanding. Just to give you some ideas, the World Energy Transition Outlook, we have this global analysis for 2050. We have, of course, increasing biomass in different sectors. So the use of biomass is increasing in many different sectors. Of course, the feedstock that we'll also discuss later, it's a key component that we need to decarbonize or defossilize, if you like. But I would like to bring also the message that in terms of setting targets for the biomass, as the RED II is proposing, specific sectors as well, so that the sectorial targets and the relation from other initiatives that we may want to coordinate further, such as the aviation fuel that was mentioned, the sustainable aviation fuel and others. It is very important because at the end of the day, we would like to see, ambition, but also implementation coordinated. So last but not least, I think the key message that I would like to bring here is this increasing role of biomass in the region, as mentioned before, in the global as well, by 2050. So we need to have in mind that without biomass, we see a very difficult challenge to implement the decarbonization, but as also, as I said, it's a link with different policies and recommendations. And in our World Energy Transition Outlook, we also see an increasing and an important, I would say, key role of the electrification with renewables. So this is the main drive for the decarbonization in different sectors. And we see biomass as a complementary to where we cannot really electrify, even with hydrogen. So, I will stop here. Maybe we can explore further other topics. So thank you for that.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for the very clear insights, Ricardo, on what we are trying to achieve on the role of biomass. Putting things into context. I had maybe a short follow up on how to strike the right balance between the use of biomass for energy and for feedstocks to decarbonize the energy sector. I don't know if there are any further elements you would like to add in that regard.
Thank you. Yes. So I would like to bring some also narratives and numbers from the World Energy Transition Outlook. So basically, once we look at the use of biomass in different sectors, and of course, we're talking about heat in buildings and industry. We're talking about, feedstock for chemicals and petrochemicals. We need to defossilize this sector. This is a challenge sector, but also, the role in different regions in the world related to transport as well, aviation, as said before. So we have a set of end-use sectors that we need to increasingly see the penetration of biomass. But specifically, I would like to bring attention here for the, feedstock. So indeed, we need to manage this, and investments are really needed in terms of new technologies, new processes, and this is maybe a sector that we need to bring more attention. I think Europe is already applying a lot of investment in these new technologies for this sector, with the key role. Basically, the importance of keeping that trend under the context of the EU allocation of funds, research and development, that's also an important aspect, because we're not talking about EU at the end of the day, we're talking about biomass in the context of the world, and the fossilization of specific sectors is key. So I think EU has an important role in that sense. Back to you.
I'm gonna move now to the third speaker, Marinda Galindo from Tilia. Tilia is a Franco-German service company, mainly working at local level with cities and utilities in achieving concrete projects. So she will bring the practical implementation experience. So good morning, Marina. So I wanted to ask you about the heating sector, which is half of the final energy consumption in the EU and sometimes go under the radar in terms of decarbonization policies. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think that the EU and member states generally stand in terms of heating and cooling decarbonization, and why, this heating and cooling is taking a more prominent role in the different strategies and in the European debate at this stage?
Okay. If you want, maybe we can show a graph on the situation of the EU at its different member states. I prepared a slide on that. If someone can please put it on. So
yes, please. Yeah.
So we go to the next slide. You can see this graph on the right that shows, even if it's a little bit small, the situation of the EU and the different member states in terms of the use of renewables in heating and cooling. So the EU is in 2019 22% fueled by renewables for its heating and cooling demand. So we could say that it's better than transport and worse than electricity sectors. We can see that the situation of the different countries varies a lot. So we have some countries that are already mostly supplied by renewables for their heating and cooling demand. So on the top of the list, we have Sweden, Latvia, and Finland, Denmark, which interestingly, it are also countries that have a high share of district heating and cooling based on renewables. So we will come back to that point. And on the other side of the spectrum, we can see Ireland, the Netherlands, or Belgium, where we have only 6 to 8% of use of renewables. So why is heating and cooling important? Well, as you were saying, Antonio, heating and cooling is 50% of the final energy demand in Europe, and it's still 75% fed by fossil fuels. So decarbonizing heating and cooling is a priority if we want to achieve the climate targets for the EU. And what is good news for us is that the heating and cooling sector has already mature technologies that are already being used in some of the countries, and we can see that in the graph. So we have heat pumps fueled by renewable electricity. We have district heating and cooling fueled by renewables and waste heat sources. We also have biomass, we have biogas. So we have different solutions that are mature, and we will need them all to decarbonize the sector. But what we can see also in the last packages is that district heating and cooling got a little bit more of attention, and that's because there's something interesting about district heating and cooling is that this infrastructure tackles simultaneously different objectives and targets for the energy and economic policies. So they can be part of an energy efficiency strategy. So they are linked to the energy efficiency of buildings, and they enable also holistic energy planning. This means addressing the demand and the supply at the same time. They allow also to integrate local and renewable energy sources, also excess waste heat that otherwise would remain untapped. And that can only be seen if this comprehensive planning is undertaken. It can also provide flexibility to the electricity system, and this is something that we can see in more mature markets, like in Denmark or Sweden, where thermoelectrical equipment like large heat pumps or electric boilers coupled with thermal storage are already providing balancing services to the TSOs. So this is something that I think is very interesting. They do it in a very cost-efficient way, which is also key, as we just heard. And these networks also allow to somehow break those silos, as we heard before, between different sectors and between different energy carriers. So that's why they are quite interesting. They are also flexible in terms of energies and technologies to be used. They can evolve through time and integrate little by little the latest technologies and new energy sources as they become more cost efficient and they are identified. And they also allow to integrate consumers in the governance and in the local energy governance of the cities. So that's why we are hearing more and more talk about district heating. There's this small graph on the bottom that shows the countries where more district heating is being used for tackling the heating and cooling demand, and you can see that we see again the Scandinavian and Baltic countries, which are also on top of the list when it comes to decarbonization performance in heating and cooling.
I'll have a short follow-up in a minute, but before that, I wanted to remind the audience to ask questions via Slido, so that we can ask our three speakers in a minute in the Q&A session. So please, if you want to ask something, use Slido. But Marina, I wanted to come back to you on district heating and cooling. I mean, we see, I think, the advantages and the benefits, the potential for energy system integration and to help heating and cooling decarbonization. But at the end of the day, district heating and cooling is happening only on a limited number of member states. So how we can incentivize or persuade those where district heating and cooling is not happening to go in that direction?
Yeah, you're right. So today, district heating and cooling is only 12% of the market at EU level. And we have some countries where there's no district heating and cooling networks at all. In general, the general public and policy awareness on the district heating and cooling benefits is still very low. But I am convinced that in some cases, when district heating is the most cost-efficient solution, it makes sense to promote it. But for this, you have first to know the technology, and you have to first assess what is the local situation. So what is what are the technical equipments that have your buildings in this in a certain district or city, because not all buildings are compatible technically with district heating and cooling, and maybe for those, and there are other decarbonization solutions that are more optimal. So I think that comprehensive energy planning for heating, it's essential. So I think that for those countries where there's no district heating and cooling at all, it's important to understand that this is an option, to look at some examples of how it works, because and this is the work that we've been doing also for the Commission, to present some case studies of best performance in district heating and cooling, and to somehow then create the conditions for supporting this solution when it makes sense. So I would say that you need to be aware that this solution exists, and you need to identify where it makes sense. So from a technical and economical point of view, and where it makes sense, I think it's important to make sure that the prices are competitive against the different solutions, especially for fossil solutions. So it will probably need some policy and financial support still. And I think that in this sense, it's interesting to look at some emerging district heating markets like France, where the whole renewable heating strategy now, it turns a lot into supporting sustainable district heating and cooling. And there is a number of measures in place to promote sustainable district heating, meaning networks with higher, with using more than 50% of renewables and waste heat. And there are some investment subsidies for these projects. There's also a reduced TBA for these networks and other urban policies, for instance, zoning exists, so where under certain conditions it is possible to make it mandatory to connect to sustainable district heating and cooling networks. And by doing so, France aims at multiplying by 5 their networks by 2030 compared to 2012, and to achieve 65% of renewables in those networks. So I think that's an interesting case to look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Marina. Very clear on what could be done and how we can persuade others to follow the district heating and cooling path. So I would like now to move to the Q&A. So if we can have the Slido questions on the screen, please. Let's see if there is something new for this session. Yeah, there is one question on how to overcome competition between renewables and energy efficiency measures and investments. And about the energy efficiency first principle, whether it's really operational for that aim. I don't know, colleagues, if you want to intervene on that. I mean, on how to conciliate energy efficiency and renewable efforts and make them complementary. Maybe Christian, I don't know if you want to go first.
I'd be happy to. I think it's a very, very, very interesting question because indeed, if I had to put it out there, I would perhaps say cost efficiency first rather than energy efficiency first. We have examples where it is just cheaper to basically deploy renewables than make the same amount of carbon reductions through efficiency measures. So we need to assess very carefully how do we spend the public money best, and how do we direct investments. I want to be very clear, this is not to say that we don't need efficiency. We absolutely need efficiency, but energy efficiency, but we need to make sure, as it was indicated, make sure that these policies are complementary. I think one more key thing to highlight here is the importance of electrification in that entire equation, because by switching to electric solutions in the end-use sectors, you actually achieve those efficiency benefits. Whether it's the heat pump or the electric car, we see significant efficiency gains compared to their fossil colleagues, if I may. So think when thinking about energy efficiency, think electrification, and probably that is the best way to achieve the cost-efficient approach.
Very clear, thanks, Christian. I mean, cost efficiency indeed is crucial, and indeed electrification is a mean to achieve energy efficiency, because you would electrify processes that are less efficient. So I think that's very very good. Now, Ricardo, turning to you. I mean, any views from your angle at the International Renewable Energy Agency on the subject?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Very important question indeed. As said before, we need to be sure that we coordinate all the efforts. So energy efficiency and the penetration of renewables are, different sides of the same coin. Basically, we need to partner together, to develop together instruments that we can bring both together, and to also to align schemes and finance that will really be able to implement both together. I think again, I can bring you some numbers. The World Energy Transition Outlook, we cannot achieve what the 1.5C globally without keeping at the same level the consumption of energy in the world. And of course, the increasing penetration of renewable, so both energy efficiency to kind of stabilize the consumption, and renewable energy increasingly, and that's of course the drive, as mentioned, electrification, help both. So I think it's a very interesting pathway, roadmap. So I think, again, both together, I would say, so let's try to have that as much as possible. Back to you, please.
Okay, thanks, Ricardo. Very, very clear message on how to make things compatible. And at the end of the day, it's true that it's two sides of the same coin that need to work together to achieve decarbonization. So thanks a lot for that. Then, I mean, finally, Marina, I mean, any elements on this question from your side on how to make both compatible efficiency and renewables?
Yeah, I think that there's a very important tool that is operational, can be done today by any city that wants it, and needs to analyze in detail what is the status of their city and their districts and the building stock. So to understand the demand. And from this, we can see if it needs also some energy efficiency investments or not. Probably yes. And then once you understand your demand, you can also try to value what are your local resources. There may be some waste heat sources around, some data center, metro, wastewater utility, and also renewables, geothermal, biomass, solar, that can be used to supply that demand. So I think that this comprehensive planning if we do it with a long-term perspective, it allows to have a technologically neutral vision on what are the best options to decarbonize your city. And I think that the work has to be done a lot at local level. So we need to go district by district and city by city, looking for potential synergies, looking for what is the situation and what are the possible energy sources around, and seeing what is the most intelligent way to value it. And there are many synergies that can be valued. And I think that we cannot separate energy efficiency and renewables and this energy planning, if we integrate it into normal urban planning procedures, can be a very powerful tool to decarbonize. And if we look at some of the cities that did so, it's impressive. And the figures, they talk by themselves. So I would say that something that needs to get for sure higher attention is integrating energy planning in urban planning at city level.
Many thanks for that. I think the importance of the local level is clear, and the integration of planning, the need to have a comprehensive energy planning at local level is extremely important. So I wanted to turn to the three of you for one final question. I mean, we have like 4 minutes left, so I'm going to give you 1 minute to each. And the question is more, I mean, we've discussed about the measures of the directive, and we've got a good insight throughout the session on what's needed to achieve goals. But then I wanted to turn to the goal itself, to the overall ambition, to the 40% renewable target. I mean, some people say that this is extremely ambitious, that we will need to double the current share of renewables, we need to accelerate and multiply by 3 the pace of deployment. Some others say that it's not ambitious enough and that we will need to do much more to achieve climate neutrality. I mean, do you have any views in 1 minute on that? Is it ambitious enough? It is not. It's just the right level. So I will start all the way around this time. Marina first, then Ricardo, and then finally Christian.
Well, I think that setting ambitious targets, it's always good. So somehow what we see here is that what we were doing was not enough. We need to aim higher. And in the end of the day, it's an indicative target that can be maybe in the end, I mean, some countries may go farther, and some others. So each country will have to see what is their local situation. But I think that for me it seems realistic, at least, and it shouldn't be lower than that. It could be higher, maybe. So let's first get there, and then we'll see. So I would say let's just set some targets for here in 3 years or 4, and start doing things today, and tomorrow we will see. Okay.
Thank you very much. Clear, realistic, but perhaps it could be a bit higher in the future. Ricardo, what's your take on that?
Yeah. At the end of the day, we would like to see, the 2050 numbers increasingly getting around, global level, 75, 80% of total primary supply. This is what we have in the World Energy Transition Outlook. So, of course, it's a roadmap, it's a pathway. So I think the 5-5 message, as I said, is a very, I would say, good starting point, and the 40% doubling the ambition is a really an important message for different countries and regions. But I mean, half empty or half full, right? So I think it's good to say that keep open the ambition level to be increased. I mean, minimum 40%, but of course the realistic is important. So we need to propose something that is doable, that's feasible, that is aligned with all the objectives without jeopardizing the implementation. So I think we need to keep also that in mind. So I think it's a very good starting point.
Thanks a lot, Ricardo. Very good starting point. I keep that as the conclusion. I mean, Christian, your final minute, half empty or half full? How is the glass?
Well, the glass is definitely not full enough right now when it comes to delivering. I think the ambition of reaching 500 gigawatts of additional deployment of renewable capacity in, what do we have left, eight years and a couple of months, is extremely ambitious. And it is a necessary ambition to do what's necessary for the climate. But we need to be clear about the fact that it is really the delivery that matters now. If the ambition has no delivery, it's not, how much does it matter? We need to focus on the enabling measures, making sure that this ambition turns into action on the ground. It is ambitious, and we need now to do what is necessary. So it's time for action rather than talks about ambition, in my view.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. We need to walk the talk. That's clear and that's well noted. With this in mind, I'm going to conclude the session. So I would like to thank the three distinguished speakers for their insightful presentations, the six that have participated throughout the session today. I think it's been really useful to hear the different perspectives, and I think that's an excellent starting point on all the future discussions on the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive through the ongoing co-decision process, which will hopefully bring the new directive into life in the not very long time. So thanks a lot for your attention. The next session of the Sustainable Energy Week is on how CINEA delivers on the EU Green Deal, and will start in a few minutes. So stay tuned. Thank you very much.